we've got our people willing and able to share and present, and we've got breakout rooms. That's good. Okay. Well, yeah, look, it's 3 minutes in, and we always want to make the best use of our time. So I will get started. Welcome to second meetup of the year for the Microsoft Loop user group. I sneaked in one shortly before the release of the Loop app, and we looked at Word Online and whiteboard integration with components, in full knowledge that only a week later the Loop app would be released. But of course, I couldn't really talk about that, even though we'd all guessed it because it was in the Message Center, right? Message Center people? Yeah, of course. So yes, this session is going to be all about getting your first impressions and sharing those. And we do have a couple of people I've invited along because I'm sick of hearing myself in these sessions to share their first impressions. But we'll also all get a chance to do that as we use the breakout rooms a bit later on. We do have enough people at this point. I'm sure there'll be more as they come along, but we'll be using breakout rooms effectively and splitting the group in 2 or 3 and increasing the surface area for discussion. Sound good? Thumbs up, react, whatever. Float your floating hands in the black background fill. Awesome. Okay. So just a quick start to sort of set the tone in terms of how we run these meetups. It is all about learning together. We are using Miro here as a way of thinking how might we create this immersive experience of people being able to be in the board too. Actually, with saying that, I might just make sure that you're following along. Bring you all to me. This is a feature I hope that Loop will have one day, so it feels like it's a canvas that you can jump around in and make people follow. Good. Yep. So it's all about learning together. None of us are experts. We know the drill. Community is the expert. So that's what this is all about, learning Loop together. And so we'll also use a format we've been using quite successfully over the last year, which is 20-minute talk and then 20 minutes of us breaking out into breakout rooms and discussing things and sharing thoughts. I like this because it makes sure that our topic of speaking and the like is just nice and concise, and then it gives us all the opportunity to react and ask questions or talk to each other about our thoughts. And I'll keep hitting that button there to allow people in. So today's talk is the Loop app and first impressions. We have Ben. I should have asked how to say your last name, Ben, but look, you can come off mute and introduce yourself.
That's assuming I can find the mute button on my Stream Deck. Yeah, it's fine, Daryl. Anything close to my last name counts. But the last name is Stegink. The G is like a J. So Stegosaurus like a dinosaur, Steg, and then ink like an ink pen. But yes, the amount of different pronunciations I've heard is never ending. But you summed it up well there. I don't know what to title myself because I work for myself, started my own company, Intelligink. So some days I'm the cloud expert, some days I'm a cloud ninja, some days I'm just the cloud guy. Sometimes I'm the do whatever somebody asks me to do guy. But LinkedIn profile, Twitter, best ways to contact me. Also co-host a podcast, MS Cloud IT Pro podcast with Scott Hogues, who some of you may know as well. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Microsoft
Awesome,
MVP.
thanks.
I can add that now. I always forget. Microsoft MVP as of like January.
Some of us actually deliberately forget it because, I mean, it is an honor, but it's also just something that we do. So yeah, it's perfectly fine to forget. I was also unsure in inviting Bex whether she was able to make it with us today, but she has early in the morning in Melbourne. So Rebecca, feel free to come off mute and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name's Rebecca Jackson from the future. For some of you, it's Thursday, 5 a.m. in the beautiful land of the Wurundjeri people here in Melbourne, Australia, which I'm just getting used to being back in. Hello to people who I saw in Seattle last week. That was very surreal. I'm glad I could wake up for this because I'm a big fan of Loop and super excited that we've been able to play with it already at Avanade. And I'm just checking my text messages while my husband orders me a coffee from Macca's for the uninitiated McDonald's in Australia.
Macca's. Everything's
Macca's,
Macca's,
mate.
Whackers, or where's a Badoo or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it.
Lovely to be here. Also Microsoft MVP, but just general Microsoft nerd.
Microsoft nerd for sure. I enjoy all the nerds that I've met over my years in the community, and Bex and I connected at a conference over OneNote and her love for sketchnoting sessions and the like. So that was cool. Lastly, me, Daryl Webster from Modern Work Mentor and WM Reply. I'm into change management and adoption, and I will be your host as usual. I will try and manage my mute too, because I do hear a rubbish truck in our neighborhood doing the rounds. So this should be fun. I might get Bex and Ben to be doing a lot of the talking beforehand as well. So that's perfectly fine. What is today all about? Well, I'm going to switch now from Miro to presenting, or using at least, a loop. Why not a loop? That's going to be good. Let's just flick on over to that. It's not that we can use Loop so much as a presentation tool, but certainly this could be a way of experiencing and using it within our meetings. And we're making sure that it's content first and then chat and discussion along the side. So that's kind of cool. So what do you think? Microsoft Loop released in April. No, March. It was March. Yeah, it's about a month now. Must be a month, Andy? Because we sort of talked about it on your show with John a week or two after. Well, no, it was the same week. And the app is it'd be hotly weighted, contested, whatever, to be able to use it, because the component experience was sort of here, there, and everywhere. It didn't feel like we had a place to anchor our experience with Loop. But rather than doing some massive introduction, we're going to hear from Ben and Rebecca, and we'll just sort of spend 5 to 7 minutes or so each to talk about our first impressions and just think about what it was like as we opened up Loop for the first time. We know that there were some admin steps and things that we had to go through, so let's not spend too much time or any time there, because we can cover that later. But really the Loop app and that experience. And I'll hand it over to Ben to start with. Ben, tell us a few thoughts about Loop, and maybe take us through the day in the life of Ben as he explored the Loop app. And you're mute.
Unmute. There we go. Now am I unmuted? All right. So I'll be honest, I had mixed reviews or mixed thoughts when I first opened this for the very first time. And to your point, Daryl, I come from an admin background. So when I first open up one of these apps, I am thinking about it from an IT pro admin sort of view. Me as an end user, one, how can I use it? I was thrilled to get it. I couldn't wait to get it. I've used Confluence in the past. I've tried Notion. I'm not a big fan of Notion. Putting all my cards on the table, not a big fan of it, but really wanted to try Loop. First impression was Loop is much more comparable, in my opinion, to actually Confluence than it is to Notion. So if I was going to compare this to a third-party product, first impressions, absolutely very similar to Confluence, in my opinion. Got in, and first thing is workspaces. So in all fairness, I did get a little bit of a preview of this before it was released. I kind of had some ideas around what was coming. But going into workspaces, I was like, great, a workspace. I work with clients. Maybe I can manage this for clients, set up workspaces for clients. So I went in and started setting up a couple workplaces and started looking at the security. How am I going to manage these workspaces? Where is this content stored for these workspaces? How can I secure these workspaces? As I'm working with some of my contractors, some of the people I work with for these different clients, how do I get them access? I was frankly a little disappointed here in that workspaces, you're not able to secure them based on a Microsoft 365 group or a security group. So they kind of just stand out on their own. They're managed security on a user by user basis. And this is where I would say there could be some good things about that, but I was really hoping Loop would allow me to set up a workspace, tie it to a team, and have all of my client files for my team and my Loop notes tied together. That was probably my first kind of disappointment. There's ways you can work around it. Hopefully, this is something that comes in the future too, in terms of even being able to have a workspace and say, just give everybody in this team access to this workspace and do it on groups instead of having to do it user by user. So from an admin, that was kind of my first thought was, this is kind of a bummer that it's not secured by teams. But some things that I've really liked about it and things that I wish were in OneNote, because I've also used OneNote a lot, is some of the integration and components. So Daryl has Loop up right now. Like if Daryl hits the / to insert, one of my favorite things in this is tasks. Inserting a task list into Loop. Being able to go start assigning tasks, especially if you're doing meeting notes in here, if you're collaborating around a specific project, being able to take those notes, add somebody to assign it to, give it a due date, and the fact that this doesn't get stuck in Loop. If you do this today in OneNote, especially I come from a Mac, I'm on a Mac, it gets stuck in OneNote. There's no way to really send this out anywhere else. As soon as you start adding these, they get created as a planner plan in Planner. And because you start getting assigned to them, they also start showing up in Microsoft To Do if you have that To Do and Planner integration set up. So being able to create these task lists, have them show up in a place where I can actually manage tasks, super awesome. Love this aspect of Loop and tasks. The downside is kind of like what Daryl is saying. There's some pros and cons to how they did this. Again, it's preview. Every time you create a new task list or a new, got to say this right, Daryl. Every time you create a new page and add a task list to it, it creates a new planner plan. I don't know if you played with this, Daryl, yet. If you do another / and do another tasks, it creates another bucket in Planner. And you can actually go in Planner and move tasks between the two buckets, and they'll rearrange between these two buckets in Loop itself. Now, yeah, I saw the shocked face. It's kind of cool. Downside is, if you do hop over to Planner, you'll notice that all the buckets are named tasks. So you don't know which bucket is associated with which task list. Again, something I can very easily see them changing, where now you'd have a bucket for tasks, a bucket for tasks, second bucket, that sort of stuff. But really, how is integrating all this stuff together instead of just another bucket to put content in. So tasks, you see the at to find. I could talk forever, Daryl. This will be my last one, I promise. Then I'll let you talk, Rebecca. Doing the at and being also to add documents to it. So I don't know what type of environment you're in, Daryl, if you can just start doing at and having it pop up, not just people, but files. So you can quickly go look through your SharePoint environment, files recently used, your OneDrive, and start integrating those files into Loop as well. So it really allows you to pull all of this information together inside a Loop. And I like that, where it's not another bucket, it's not recreating stuff, but allowing you to pull all this stuff in from different locations. That's been another one of my favorite ones because, again, as you're doing meeting notes, you're referencing a certain presentation. You can pull all this stuff together. I saw one comment go by in the chat about being able to select the planner plan that these tasks go to. No, there's not. I wish there was. I have a long list of feature requests that I have given to some of the people on the Loop team, and that is one of them. Is to be able to say this particular workspace is associated with this planner plan, so that as you create tasks and to-do list, they go into this planner plan, they go into this bucket. Again, I keep telling myself, Daryl's reminded me of this a few times too, when I'm like, I want this. He's like, Ben, it's a preview feature. It's a preview app. Yeah, there's still stuff coming. And I just like everything right away. But those are some of my first impressions, kind of some of my favorite things that I discovered as I was playing with the Loop app was tasks in particular, how those work, tying in documents. Some of the admin management stuff was some of my, it's kind of a bummer. But I think they'll get there in terms of once this hits GA, there's going to have to be a lot more of those management, IT pro features there to be able to allow me as an admin to manage it a little better.
That's a good summary. And like I think with the lens on as someone who's interested in user experience, but also admin, you take that pathway through based on what you're interested in, and you're already thinking, I'm going to manage this thing, and does it do this and does it do that? So yeah, I definitely relate to some of those. I'm sure we're going to hear a different journey from Bex as she shares a bit of her experience. And yeah, Bex, tell us, look, is it that you're using it at Avanade and starting to use it within a team? Yeah, tell us about your first experiences.
Yeah, I'll give you the context of how we're using it at Avanade. So we're not using it with any clients at the moment. We've got a very restricted preview of, I think from memory, about 17 people, which is pretty awesome. We took the opportunity to include people from the business, but also a number of our MVPs that we have at Avanade. So a mix of real people and people who work in teams and passionate people who we know will be positively critical and give good feedback to Microsoft. So in that, we kind of moved really quickly into it. So we didn't have much of a plan on the approach, except that we picked people who we knew worked together and we knew would experiment really well. My personal experience was I was really excited just to get it, kind of thing. Like I was pleased that the visual experience lined up with the screenshots and things that we've seen from however many years ago we first started seeing them. So it was very familiar. I really like the thought they've put into the new starter experience as well. Not perfect, but it felt that there were lots of mechanisms to help me as someone new to start building things out, having something already ready to go and that kind of thing. But the devil's always in the details. So some areas of concern / that I'm paying attention to is that, when we create a new workspace, what happens? We get a new site. And what I've noticed using the workspaces connected to our real production environment is that when I want to mention someone or perhaps look for a document to include in a workspace or something like that, the search experience is as good as the sites that have been created. Is probably the best way for me to put that. So I'm not sure, Daryl, if you know if there's anything on the roadmap about that, but that's one for me that I really want to dig into a little bit more, because as with many of these tools, I just see site proliferation as a potential outcome, and I think it affects the way you use the tool as well. If you want to be able to look for other people or look for other sites or look for documents easily, they need to be easily found, right? So if I'm kind of like glancing over on my other screen to look at Teams and Loop and see what notes and things that I've got. I think the group that we've got have found it reasonably intuitive, but we've also been finding things along the way that haven't been intuitive. So I've found a strange experience with components where if I'm putting a component into a workspace, I kind of expected it to automatically be a loop component, like that was kind of my expectation. I don't know if that was reasonable or not, but I thought anything that I put in the workspace would be a component. And then I realized that I need to turn it into a component so that it can be something that's transportable and shareable, which makes sense. I just haven't found that to be very streamlined. What I think is that that's probably just some nuances and things to iron out in
The question
the
on that, Bebs,
usability. Yeah, go
do you
ahead.
mean the component you might create from a chat or an email, wanting to take that and put that into a workspace, you expected it to be this embedded component on the page?
Good clarification. No, I mean, as you're typing along, you're typing text, and then you can turn that's kind of just text in the workspace, but then you can say, oh, I want to turn that text area or list or task list into an official component. And I'm kind of like thinking about the right phraseology and thinking about how I explain this to people, which is part of the challenge, is that if I want it to be turned into a portable component that can be put in another page, in another workspace, in a chat or whatever, I have to take an action. And I just didn't find that really obvious. And I would love to hear other people who've had a play with it, what they felt about that as well. So that was kind of super quick, Daryl, but when you hovered, it has that create loop component thing. And I was like, aren't they all just loop components? That makes sense. But it just felt, there's a bit of a disconnect there for me. I might pause and see if other people kind of felt the same way when they were playing with that.
Yeah. We could open it up, but I think we'll flick that over to the breakout rooms shortly. Awesome. But I hear what you're saying, that the terminology of what is a component certainly became more confusing when the Loop app came out, because a component was something you attached to an email or to a group chat or something like that. But now it's also anything that you put on the page. And, you can also turn anything you select into a component as well. So we've got components within components. And I know that's an overused analogy, but the Inception kind of thing, you just need to start spinning your top to see which reality you're in to understand how many layers you are deep. But you have definitely different valid comments for sure and good feedback. Was any other thoughts you had to say before we maybe just open up the breakout rooms or open it up to the people here?
I think that the other thing that I experimented with, and I know others probably would have done this as well, is like, I can create a component here. What does it look like when I put it somewhere else? And the earliest thing I noticed is that I can create a whiteboard with loop components from my personal chats that are saved in my OneDrive, but that did not work for components created in the new workspace, which I think we've already provided that feedback, and I'm assuming that's just a limitation because of where the product's at. But that was a bit disappointing because I was just immediately like, put components everywhere. and I didn't get that kind of consistent experience that I wanted.
Yeah. Perhaps as a way
good question about OneNote in the chat.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That was can loop components be used within OneNote yet? Look, if I can say something here too, like we keep seeing renders and ideas of what's coming, and that change is fluid, if I can borrow a term that actually relates to Loop itself. We saw it back and forth in terms of what meeting notes was going to be powered by, and there was a OneNote logo for a little while, and that was talked about working with OneNote. Now it's just its own thing. So we're all hoping to see components being supported in more of those Office apps, so that we have a Loop app experience that brings it all together, but also being able to take our Loop ideas and collaboration spaces in the places that we work and in the apps that we work. So hopefully OneNote will be one place that is the case too. I know I forgot to actually say, let's use the Q&A as part of as part of managing questions instead of chat, but that's all right. We'll get around to that. We'll do a better job next time. What I do want to do at this point is have a quick look at how many people are in the room and then start up our breakout groups. And I'm also going to change our Miro board over to editing mode. So that means that the same link, and I'll add this link into the chat for those who joined a bit later, will be editable. Copy that link. Have a look-see in the chat. Now the idea, and I'll introduce this shortly, is that you can click on that link in the chat and you'll join us all in the board. And there's a few people here already now. And if we go just over to, this section here, breakout groups. So I'm going to start up some breakout rooms here. I'm going to roughly say, look, we'll try and aim at about 4 or 5 people per room, and you'll be just randomly assigned. We'll just let a couple more people back in. So the idea is that within those breakout groups, you'll discuss 2 questions for 20 minutes or so, and we'll come back and we'll, maybe discuss some of those outcomes and themes that came within the breakout rooms. Now the old idea with this is to try and increase the surface area so we can actually discuss things. The online user groups that we've had over the lockdown experiences and COVIDs have been quite person talking, us frantically chatting, some questions have been answered. Well, breakout groups are exactly the reason for this. So what are the 2 questions that we're going to look at? We're going to look at, first of all, what are your first impressions of the Microsoft Loop app? So you'll talk about that within your breakout groups. And the idea is that you double click on, a sticky note as well. If someone's saying something or you want to add something to the board and you say, my first impression, it is a pretty app. I don't know, anything like that. And your thoughts, even just sort of talk about your first impressions as you explored it. Our second question down here is, what would you ask the Loop product team to work on next and why? And we've had some good examples from Bex and Ben. So, I welcome that sort of stuff within the chat breakout rooms as well. So I'm going to try and do this real quick so that we don't... Alex, Miro's blocked in your domain. Huh. Shocking. Funny thing, eh? And I wonder if this is going to be the same thing with a number of different... AI-driven products as well, domains being blocked. Anyway, let's get the rooms going. We have roughly 15 people plus Ben and myself, and so we'll go with 3 breakout rooms. They'll be randomly assigned. Let's do that, create the rooms. I must say this experience of creating breakout rooms has got a bit easier than when it first started. We'll open up these rooms, and what will happen is you'll be beamed over into the rooms at any point in time, so don't worry too much. I will also hang out here in the this lobby space or whatever to see if people get dropped and need to be added back in. But we're also not recording the breakout rooms. That's your place to go for guns. Share what you actually think. We're not capturing anything there. Let's get to it. So it'll be for about 20 minutes, and then I'll bring you back and we'll do a bit of a roundup. So opening the rooms now, and we'll see you there in a bit. Pretty good. Takes a little while for it to happen. And he's back.
I almost got it in, Eric.
Almost.
And we're back in the room.
You are back in the room. And was anyone in the middle of saying something really interesting and then wondered why no one was responding?
That was Ben.
That's
you'd
like
be
coming
surprised
into one
to
of
learn.
those.
So I have.
So you'd be surprised to learn, Daryl, we're talking about drawing.
Oh, of course.
Yes.
Right.
So I have a question for the group because I can't remember where I saw this come up. Inking in Loop. Would people want a native ink experience? So add do a whack and add handwriting and then write in Loop? Or would people want to embed a currently enabled inking platform, embed a OneNote page that you hand wrote on, or embed a whiteboard that you would hand
I
write?
want both.
I would suspect whiteboard is the way that they're going to do that, because you can do it already to a degree. And once they get the actual proper embed as opposed to just a link, but basically that will be the inking experience, right? I don't think they're going to recreate that directly in Loop unless you can bring existing OneNote stuff in there.
Secret squirrel about the reason that whiteboard paused for a bit and then took a little while to come back. It was rewritten in Fluid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The whole of whiteboard.
Huh? Not all of whiteboard.
Oh.
Yeah. So it was its own standalone app. It took a sort of a rebuild and then came back into the browser and was kind of a bit easier to use in different places, but it's using Fluid underneath it. So they are building the ability to ink in Fluid documents.
So what if you embed a Loop component in a whiteboard, embed the whiteboard in Loop, and then re-embed that Loop back in the whiteboard?
Inception.
That's spiral on that one.
Don't think about it. Let's just do
inking?
it.
Yeah, and then if you imagine those as borders, I should stop sharing here. Border of the first embed, the second embed, the third embed. Then draw a line from the edge through to the center and see what happens. Where do those appear? Is it an annotation or is it the ink starting? It's all right. I'm getting visual.
If you manage to do all of that, Christopher Nolan's going to hire you to write his next movie.
Yeah, and I'll write it backwards.
Loopception.
Or
I'm curious, Daryl, for people, Ben and Brain work not good names. I want to say Eric. Where are you? I'm looking for you on the screen, or if you've disappeared already. Eric. We seem to be of the inking ilk, right? But inking ilk, I'm going to use that. For people on the call who maybe don't ink a lot, is there any interest in being able to do that? That's what I'm always curious about with inking, Daryl, because I love to draw, right? So I'm always going to want to do that. But is that something that would appeal in any way to other people, to have a component where you could just scribble a quick diagram, pop that in Outlook, pop that in, you know what I mean? I want to do that. Do other people want to do that?
No, I think
everybody
even
just say
annotation, even just annotation to circle something and say, hey, this is what I'm talking about. That's valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, especially if you think about it in a meeting, right? And you're taking notes and you're actually, I like to draw things as well, but just to draw things so that other people can understand what I'm talking about. Not that I'm a good artist, but I'll draw triangles and squares and circles and join them together and whatnot. And that might be something that could be useful in the meeting notes capability, right? As a component, have that little diagram that we were talking about saved as part of the meeting notes, rather than a separate whiteboard that you then have to share with everybody or whatever it is. So it's actually an interesting thought.
I like Hermine's comment in the chat that we always want choice, even if we don't use it. And that's definitely true of our many ways of managing tasks in the Microsoft ecosystem, that we have choices. Andy?
I just want to minimize switching between apps as much as possible. I'm just the friction of switching between apps is just driving me crazy, and I just want a central workspace to be able to put some ideas together and to be able to build on those thoughts. And I think that's not just specific to like what we're talking about here, but just the Microsoft ecosystem as a whole. There's so much switching between apps to be able to do like a thing. Like I got to go to 5 different apps to, go to Planner and do this, go over, to my whiteboard and do that, go back to my notes over here and do this. Like, just help me to centralize some of that workflow so I can be more productive.
Absolutely. You actually hit on one of the, what you could say, design principles or user principles of Loop, is bringing it all together and trying to make it as simple as possible to get started. Yeah, there's a lot of power that's going to be under the hood as we / and do things or share stuff in different places. But now the Loop app is out, we have a place that we could start and have a workspace, but we also have a place where we can take that to the places that we are working. And, if you are working in a whiteboard, you can bring that into Loop maybe. But I'm with you, Andy. I would like to just have a place to collect my stuff with my team and know that I only have one page to go to instead of 5 channel conversations and 3 documents and 2 whiteboards and a OneNote. Yeah. Well, let's round it out, because I'm sure that many of us could talk about Loop and collaboration all day, and I just, secretly, this is the reason I run these events, is because I'm all the way down here in New Zealand, and I need to talk to other geeks like you to learn and to share and to work stuff out. So thank you all for joining us. There's the Miro board there if you there's a loop. Yeah, thanks, Gareth. If you do want to contribute a few things that you found or ideas or other resources that you might have found on actually I'm not sharing this on the Loop board, just as the bottom left corner, and I'll just share my screen to show you where that is. We've got an area that we can drop some resources in there too. So if you find some good blogs or good thoughts, I know there's been some amazing content out there already. Peter said that he had presented something at the Modern Workplace Conference in Paris. So Peter, if you've got a link through to a video recording or a slide deck or something to share on the Loop app, that'd be amazing. But that is the first session for April. The lucky Rebecca Jackson will be joining me in the second session in a friendlier time for New Zealand and Melbourne and potentially Southeast Asia if they're keen. I know there's definitely a pocket of very, very enthusiastic Japanese people about Loop. If you've seen it in Twitter, that's when I use the translate feature, it's usually in Twitter, it's like, oh, what are they saying about Loop? That's really cool. So yeah, maybe they'll join us too, maybe. But that's thank you all for joining. Thanks, Ben, for joining too and sharing and getting it all kicked off. Bex, see you a bit later on. But Alex, parting thought, or you're waving?
I was trying to clap.
I do that too. I hit raise instead of react. But yeah, we'll see you all maybe next time. We'll figure out another topic and keep learning Loop together. Bye for now.
Thanks for hosting. Bye, Daryl.
You're welcome.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Daryl. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.